This time on the hit list, we check out the survival techniques of 8 acts that were very big in the 80s. Named after the villain in the 60s sci-fi film Barberella, Duran Duran became one of the most commercially successful bands of the decade. Following a revolving lineup of singers in the late 70s, Simon Le Bon became the band's frontman, joining Nick Rhodes and 3 Taylors, Andy, John and Roger, in their rise to the top of the new romantic scene. But for all the dyed blonde tips, exaggerated pouts and David Bowie vocal impressions, they were serious about the music.
We actually wanted to perform live shows and build up a catalogue of songs that we'd written ourselves, and there's still a lot of artists out there that thankfully do that, but there are also, alongside that now, people that just want to be famous.
They had their first top 20 hit in 1981 with Planet Earth, which was quickly followed up by the number 5 hit Girls on Film. They gained worldwide recognition in 1982 with their second album, which spawned Hungry Like the Wolf, Save a Prayer and the title single Rio. Labelled the Fab Five by the British press, they scored their first US number 1 2 years later with The Reflex. Over the next couple of years, they had more hits with Wild Boys, Notorious, and the James Bond theme View to a Kill. After that came a grab bag of lineup changes, solo projects, bust-ups and reunions. Finally, in 2001, core members Simon, John, Nick and Roger decided to give it another crack, and since then they haven't looked back. Instead of banging out the old hits, they got straight to work on their first full album since 1993.
I think when I look at the early lyrics now, I see that they were very fantastical. They were fantasy lyrics, a lot of it. It was kind of, there's a bit of science fiction in there, and there was some sort of real kind of out there thinking. And I think that's because I had limited experience. And what's with age, you get life experience, and you get something a bit more concrete to base your lyrics on, And I think that's where that's really where Astronaut's at. But then, having said that, there is a bit of out there on there as well.
They went even more out there with the release of their 2007 Red Carpet Massacre, which included the controversial collaboration with Justin Timberlake, Falling Down.
The idea that, that people are getting that there's this magical rehab place, and that people every day somebody's going into rehab, and some of them are coming out transformed, most of them aren't. But we kind of took that idea and really ran with it, and it's very fashion oriented, it's very sexy, it's very crazy.
In 2008, the band underwent their own stint in rehab. Well, at least their old hits did. Undergoing the Mark Ronson treatment, songs like Wild Boys, Rio and The Reflex were remixed and revamped to help introduce Duran Duran to a new audience. Once the Uber producer had worked his magic, the band got down to the business of working out how to recreate the remixed versions live.
I think it's going to be the first time a band have tried to actually play a DJ set, whether they actually crossfades and sun's cutting in.
New Jersey-born rocker John Bon Jovi had a part-time job in a women's shoe shop before landing work at the Power Station Studios in Manhattan. While there, he recorded a demo of songs he'd written and began the long, hard road to finding fame and fortune, which began in earnest with the formation of a band that could have ended up being called Johnny Electric. At the suggestion of a friend, they reluctantly agreed to go along with Bon Jovi and scored their first hit in 1984 with Runaway. Alongside John, the lineup featured guitarist Richie Sambora, keyboard player David Bryan, drummer Tico Torres, and bass player Alec John Such. Unlike Duran Duran, Bon Jovi have never broken up, and apart from the 1994 departure of Alec, the lineup has remained rock solid. Although all members have been involved in side projects, they've rocked on together through 10 studio albums, 2 compilations and 1 live album, performing over 2,600 concerts in more than 50 countries, in front of 34 million fans. Having already passed their 20th anniversary when they released their 9th album in 2005, Have a Nice Day delivered the band the best first week sales of their career, shifting more than 200,000 albums in the US. They were in a great position to give back and donated the proceeds from sales of the title track to building homes in a depressed area of Philadelphia.
We're taking all the money from the video and using a very small portion to actually film it, but the rest of it is going to building houses for Habitat for Humanity, which ties back to all of my philanthropy and social issues that I've been very involved in the last almost 3 years now as the owner of the Philadelphia Soul. And what has made the team so successful is giving back to the community. Now that'll be multiplied by 10 because it's the band.
The album's second single, Who Says You Can't Go Home, ended up becoming a crowd favourite on Bon Jovi's world tour to support the album. The duet with Jennifer Nettles also went to #1 on the Billboard Country Chart.
Very nice, you know, it's first rock band ever, and it's #4 in the Hot AC charts, and you know, going steadily up the pop charts now that it's out on that format. So it's doing great.
While Duran Duran had Mark Ronson to help them breathe new life into their back catalogue, Bon Jovi reinterpreted their big hits themselves.
You need to be removed from a record to understand what it really is. You know, when you're caught up in the moment, you're just doing it artistically. These were old friends to a lot of people in the world, these songs, and to take them and recreate them so dramatically was a risk, but for us a reward.
Instead of ramping the tempo up on old favourites like Keep the Faith, Bed of Roses and Living on a Prayer, they took an unplugged approach and re-recorded the songs at ballad tempo. One 80s act that's remained popular with the UK audience is Cyndi Lauper. Having toured in support of 11 albums, she knows exactly what it takes to get the notoriously tough British crowd going.
I have a wonderful band, and I'm looking forward to touring England again. I haven't done it since '94, and I only have fond memories of this place and the people. You know, a lot of people say, well, English people are very reserved, and I find it opposite.
The purpose of the tour was to promote her latest album, Bring You to the Brink, which rounded up the talents of dance artists like Basement Jaxx, Scumfrog, Digital Dog and Dragonette.
What I did was I tried to reach out to other artist producers like myself, because the mindset then is when you work on your own work, it's more like band-like. And so I could make this jukebox of all these different bands that I was with. But it wouldn't really be just them, and it wouldn't be just me, it'd be something new.
More than 2 decades on from the release of hits like Girls Just Wanna Have Fun and Time After Time, the singer-songwriter, now in her mid-50s, was proving there was still plenty of life in the disco queen from Queens. 2008 also saw the staging of her second annual True Colours concert tour, which made its way across the US raising money for gay charities. Featuring an array of special guests like the Indigo Girls, Joan Jett, Margaret Cho, Rosie O'Donnell, and Queer Eye for the Straight Guy host, Carson Kressley.
But it's about community, and we partnered again with the HRC and PFLAG, the different chapters from all over the country are coming, and Centerlink, which is an outreach program for the LGBT youth. And I think that information is powerful, and while we're singing and laughing, we could also have information to feel empowered, and we're highlighting voter registration this time, because if you want inclusion in the world, you got to include yourself, you got to vote.
She's also branched out into film, helping out on the Serbian movie Here and There.
It's an independent movie. My husband is the main actor in that movie, and he had shown me the script, and the director, Darko, was a very interesting fellow, very creative, and the script I thought was really good. And it's a real indie movie. It's understated, and it's just about people, and it's about this one guy who's kind of stalled.
The same certainly can't be said of Cyndi, who's also recently collaborated with David Byrne on his album Here Lies Love. She's also appeared on the smash hit TV comedy 30 Rock. Lionel Ritchie cut his performing teeth opening for the Jackson 5 back in the late 60s. As lead singer and sax player for the Commodores, he wrote several hits for the band in the 70s, including the ballads Easy, 3 Times a Lady and Still. Later on, he started branching out and writing songs for other artists. As well as composing the Kenny Rogers #1 hit Lady, he wrote the duet Endless Love for the 1981 film of the same name. Sung by him and Diana Ross, it delivered Motown one of its biggest ever hits. Lionel's 1983 album Can't Slow Down won 2 Grammy Awards, including Album of the Year, and featured the more up-tempo classic All Night Long. Plenty more top 10 hits followed, including Hello, Stuck on You, Dancing on the Ceiling and Say You, Say Me from the film White Nights, which netted him another #1 and an Oscar for Best Song. In more recent years, he's become a phenomenon in the Arab world, particularly in Iraq. According to reports, Iraqi civilians were playing All Night Long the night US tanks invaded their country. In the Western world, he's now become famous as the adoptive father of party-loving socialite Nicole Richie. Despite her 2007 conviction for driving under the influence, he remains the picture of fatherly pride, although he makes no bones about the parental challenges he's faced along the way.
Forget about the 40 years. You said 40 years. You said 40 years.
I said what they wrote.
That scared me to death, 40 years. Forget about surviving 40 years of the music business. Just surviving 27 years of Nicole Richie has been a struggle and a half, I will tell you. I stand here as a survivor. I want you to know for all the parents out there.
Although he's scaled back the recording over the past 2 decades, he still loves getting out in front of audiences. In March 2009, he was in Dublin to kick off his latest world tour. Out to promote his album Just Go, he made sure he interspersed the new material with plenty of golden oldies.
Well, we slowly ease the new stuff in. As the album stays out, let's say now we're only a week or so into the album now, so we'll hold most of the stuff except the single. And then we'll play the single, and then from the single, then we go into the second song. Then we start releasing more because they've heard the album now.
40 years on from supporting the Jackson 5, his attitude to songwriting remains the same.
And what we've got going on here now is the strength of the melodies. All I care about is, can the people sing along with the songs? #1. #2, can they relate to the lyrics I'm writing? Period. This album is very strong in lyrics and in hooks.
Contrary to popular opinion, Pet Shop Boys Neil Tennant and Chris Lowe actually met in an electronic shop. They came up with the name of their group in tribute to friends who worked in a pet shop. After tinkering around in home studios in London and working with New York producer Bobby Orlando, they signed a deal with Parlophone Records in 1985, and Neil was able to leave his journo job at music magazine Smash Hits. Their breakthrough came with the re-released version of their single West End Girls, which went all the way to #1 the same year. They had 3 more #1s over the next 3 years, with It's a Sin, Heart, and their cover of the Elvis Presley hit Always on My Mind. Although they've never repeated the success of what Neil refers to as their imperial period, the PSB have continued pushing the boundaries of pop music. As well as way-out collaborations with the likes of Dusty Springfield, Liza Minnelli, Patsy Kensit, David Bowie and Harold Faltermeyer, They've worked with experimental film director Derek Jarman and made their own movie. In 2009, their impressive body of work was acknowledged with a Brit Award for outstanding contribution to music.
Well, initially we were quite surprised because they normally give these awards to rock artists or groups, like Paul Weller, for instance, of course Paul McCartney, what have you. So we thought it was nice that they were recognising a group who've been unrelentingly pop for the last 25 years.
They were especially chuffed to have been selected by an industry panel.
With this, it's chosen by the music industry. A panel of people at the Brits chose it, and someone told me who was at the meeting that actually everyone was really, really keen for it to be the Pet Shop Boys. And they said, I was very flattered by it, they said it was a bit like the year they had the Bee Gees. And we, of course, hold the Bee Gees in very high regard. And so I was very flattered by that.
That honour came ahead of the launch of their 10th album, Yes.
What's different about this album is that we wrote some of the songs, 3 of the songs with Xenomania, the producers, and they're based in a house in a little village in Kent. And in every room there's a different studio setup with people playing music. And it was just a fun environment.
Looking back over their old material gave them some perspective on what makes the Pet Shop Boys special.
I think one of the unique selling points of the Pet Shop Boys is that we express humour through our music. Yeah. Not always, but occasionally. I mean, I've got the brains, you've got the success and lots of money. It was sort of meant to be humorous. You know, the video for Can You Forgive Her, where it's very computerised, and Chris, now this mad space landscape, we're playing this game where we feel like this. This thing, it's sort of funny, I think. I like humour in video.
None of our other featured acts from the 80s come even close to matching the selling power of Spanish Lothario Julio Iglesias. Over the past 3 decades, the crooner from Madrid has shifted more than 300 million albums. His appeal has been boosted by his ability to sing about love in 14 languages, including English, French, German, Portuguese, Spanish and Italian. His first UK #1 came with his English language version of Begin the Beguine back in 1978. He followed up with plenty more romantic hits throughout the 80s and won a Grammy Award in 1988 for Un Hombro Solo. The 90s saw mostly Spanish language releases and a rigorous touring schedule that kept his music reaching the world. He's been quoted as saying he would rather die on stage than in bed, and that it's his relationship with audiences that has kept him going well into his 60s.
I think the secret, if there is a secret, is the people. I love people. I feel like life has been so generous to me, and that makes it sculpt my life. Sculpt means for me to discipline my life until the limits, to be as better I can in front of them. Why? Because without them, I would not survive, psychically, maybe also physically, you never know. So what I try to do is the best I can to be always strong for them, because without that, I will not be a survivor anymore.
During interviews to promote his 2003 album Divorcio, he revealed his feelings about having his 2 sons Enrique and Julio follow him into the music business.
You know, when you have kids like me, Enrique, which is an incredible singer and an artist, and Julio also sings, emotionally, you know, a father and kids, we have a very strong love. I would love to sing with my kids. I think it's a great idea to sing with the kids. But still the circumstances doesn't get us together musically. Maybe in the future, and I'm still young to do that. And they are very young.
Georgia band REM have been credited with bridging the gap between post-punk and alternative rock. Their refusal to bow to record company pressure to write more radio-friendly songs throughout the early 80s helped earn them the respect of the college set. Characterized by Peter Buck's arpeggiated guitar playing and Michael Stipe's unintelligible lyrics, their 1983 album Murmur won critical acclaim. And through constant touring and the support of college radio, they began building up a strong cult fan base, which finally delivered mainstream success in the form of their 1987 single, The One I Love. By the time REM landed their first worldwide hit with Losing My Religion in 1990, they'd already built up a large back catalogue, which was recently re-released.
Going back to the first 5 records that we made and the songs that we wrote before the first one, it feels like 5 lifetimes ago, 3 lifetimes ago. But revisiting some of the songs and figuring out what songs we were going to put on the record to present a well-rounded kind of image for newer fans of who we were then. Some of the memories felt like last week. You know, it was really kind of an intense, not trip down memory lane or nostalgic kind of thing, but kind of an intense experience to put it together.
1990s Out of Time, with its mandolins, organs and acoustic guitars, topped the US and UK charts and sold around 12 million copies. It won 3 Grammy Awards, including Best Alternative Music Album. The follow-up, Automatic for the People, featuring several string arrangements by Led Zeppelin bassist Paul Jones, went to number 2 and is still considered by critics their best album to date. Although releases of subsequent albums haven't matched the sales of the early 90s, REM's strong core audience still create demand for new music and concerts. In 2008, they released their 14th album, Accelerate.
I think one of the reasons we've managed to stick around for so long is that the honesty in what we do shows up in the music. Whether it's be exactly truth-telling or just merely doing it for the right reasons and caring about what you do, I think that's what comes through.
When singer-songwriter Stevie Nicks decided to record a solo album in 1980, it wasn't because she'd had enough of being part of superband Fleetwood Mac.
The whole reason I did a solo record was to get my extra songs out.
With 3 songwriters to accommodate on Fleetwood Mac's releases, she'd built up a big backlog of compositions that were never going to see the light of day unless she did some solo moonlighting. After releasing Belladonna, which went to number 1 in 1981, she went on to record Mirage, which featured the hit single Gypsy. Even then, she wasn't thinking about leaving the band.
With the onset of the second record, I think the band realized that I wasn't going anywhere, and I think they stopped worrying about it, because it was not, you know, I always try to think of people that have left their bands, you know. It's like Sting. He left. He left. He wanted a solo career, period. He didn't want to go back to the Police. Of course now, he's doing it this summer, but not until this summer. So, you know, who else? Somebody from now. Beyonce. She left Destiny's Child. She wants a solo career.
In fact, Stevie's loyalty to the band that made her famous seems a little surprising, considering Fleetwood Mac's messy romantic history. When they first formed in 1974, Stevie was in a relationship with singer-guitarist Lindsey Buckingham, while fellow vocalist Christine McVie was married to bass player John McVie. During the recording of the band's classic album Rumours in 1978, John and Christine broke up, as did Stevie and Lindsey, after which Stevie had a brief relationship with drummer Mick Fleetwood. Miraculously, however, even though she's gone on to have a hugely successful career of her own, she never misses an opportunity to team up with her exes. Most recently, they reunited for their 2009 Unleashed tour, which gave Stevie yet another chance to whip out the 6-inch platform heels, chiffon skirts, shawls and tambourine.